This show is brought to you by HostBaby.com, web hosting for musicians.
On episode 48 of Music Marketing Monday, we pose the question, are you running a business? Are you just dabbling in a hobby? Are you a music business pro or an amateur? These are important questions. We supply some answers here right now.
Information, inspiration, motivation for the modern musicpreneur.
Time to start your week right.
Here it comes, Music Marketing Monday, with your host, Bob Baker,
Mr. Buzz Factor,
and Billy Gryzak.
The Music Marketing Mind.
Ready? Are you sure?
Set.
Here it comes. Swing, baby.
So, do you have an expensive hobby, or are you a money-making machine? Hey, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but this is Billy Gryzak, the Music Marketing Mind, and over there, check it out, man. This is a guy that, well, he needs no introduction, so let's not have one.
Yeah, let's just move right along.
No, tell us who you are.
I'm Bob Baker, Mr. Buzz Factor. It's good to be with you again, Billy, on our marathon run of podcast recording.
Yeah, I noticed this one. It's like we're doing a month's worth of podcast recording in just a couple of hours, and I noticed like the first was like, "Hey, here we are, we're ready to do the podcast," and like now we're like, yes, welcome to the show.
Episode 48. Oh, yes, great. Here we go again. Yeah. It's the first time we've done this. You called it binge recording, I think, last week. So we are indeed. No, this is good, though. I'm getting into a flow now. I mean, I'm well-oiled.
Well-oiled. Okay, that's great. So speaking of being well-oiled, that reminds me of absolutely nothing. So let's move on.
So yes, this is the topic that we're slap happily, if that's a word, want to bring you today. Is this, how are you approaching your involvement with music? Is it as a hobby? Is it as a business? Is it as a career? And there's no right, wrong answers. There's no shame or blame in it, no matter what your answer is. But I think it's helpful to be honest with yourself.
Right. I mean, and no disrespect to anyone. Do you even know the difference? Because you might think you're in the business, and it might actually, when you analyze it, you might actually be in hobbyist mode, or vice versa. You might just consider yourself some dabbling, and you're killing it, and you're actually in the music business. So I guess what we like to do is try to help you identify that, talk about the pros and cons of each, and get a sandwich afterwards. So there we go.
It would be about lunchtime. Yeah. Have a nice little Spam sandwich.
Yeah, I'm not going to eat lunch during the show again. That was pretty embarrassing.
It's okay. So how would you define being a pro or running your music career as a business versus a hobby? Let's start with you, if you don't mind.
Well, whether you do it full-time or part-time, I guess that's something. Like, some people might consider themselves a hobbyist if they're only doing it part-time, but I beg to differ. You can run a very successful part-time business. So I guess really if you're doing music as a career, as a business, I think you should treat it as such, which means you should have certain things in place, like a good work ethic. You should have some type of plan or business plan. It doesn't have to be a big giant one, but at least a statement, that this is how I do things. You run yourself and present yourself in a professional manner, congruent with your style of music. You're promoting it, and you're making money. Now, you could have a business where you don't make money, but I think even in that situation, I think it's important to at least cover your expenses. I think if you're constantly feeding, paying your music career off with like another job, not related, you might want to re-question whether or not it's a business or a hobby, because typically the way I look at hobbies is if for a long period of time, like I understand that in the startup phase, you might need to support yourself with some other income, but in the long run, is your business at least covering its expenses, and are you making some type of profit? If you're just constantly doing it for free all the time and you're supporting it for another job, you might want to reconsider and say, this is my hobby, I do this for enjoyment. You see, so I guess those are the ways, those are the gauges, the benchmarks for me as to whether or not it's a business or a hobby. And it doesn't have to feel like a business. The most successful businesses and business people and entrepreneurs don't feel like they're going to work. It feels like fun. It feels like a hobby. So you need another way to measure it.
And that's why I use the other term. Are you a pro or are you an amateur? Which is, again, there's a lot of connotations with both of those phrases. But you can be a pro and still not necessarily making a killing money wise. But I think a lot of it has to do with your approach, your work ethic. I know there was years ago I used to talk about this thing about the conundrum of being in what I called mixed modes, and this causes a lot of frustration. And it's sort of related to what we talked about a few episodes back when we were talking about goal setting, and I was talking about how it has you to be most effective in your life. You have to have a clear vision of what you want to do. And then you also have to have the behaviors and the actions that reinforce that. And so when somebody is in mixed modes, they're thinking in their head, "Oh, I'm a music pro, or I'm building a full-time career in the music business," but their actions, the actual way that they show up every day or every week, is really as a hobbyist. And so when your behavior is in hobby mode, meaning you're just kind of dabbling, you're not taking, you wait, you only engage in the thing when you feel like it. Other things distract you. So if that's your behavior, but you're thinking that I should be a full time, I should be paying all my bills or having huge crowds or whatever, however you define success, when those things don't match up, it leads to frustration. And so it's much better to be honest with yourself and saying, if I'm only going to be taking hobby or amateur type of actions, then accept that. And then you're a lot more happier with yourself because you're not frustrated that you're not doing more with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's sort of a mindset than it is even. It's almost intangible in some ways, don't you think?
Totally, yeah, because we're dealing with different shades of the definition here, and I'll use my own personal life. Years ago, back in my 20s, even so, in my teens and early 20s, I had aspirations. I want to be a rock star. I want to be a full-time musician, and I was that for a while, for 3 or 4 years in my 20s. That was some decades ago. But then I reached a certain point, especially when I started publishing a local music newspaper, started getting more involved as a journalist, started having aspirations to publish books. I realized, and the more that I got involved, and when I was full-time, I realized the amount of dedication that it would take to make that happen. And I got a little disenchanted with it. I said, you know what? I love playing music, but I'm being called to do these other things related to music even more. And so I told myself, music is always going to be like a part-time passion for me, and that doesn't mean I'm not going to make money doing it, or I'm not going to be able to play in front of nice, great venues in St. Louis and in front of big crowds, which I have enjoyed over the years. But I was not frustrated because I wasn't doing more. I had decided that it was going to be a part-time activity that I was going to squeeze as much as I could out of, but not delude myself to think that I was still going to be a rock star, because I had these other aspirations. And I think that's helpful to get clear with yourself about what you want out of it.
I totally agree. Now, we can make it tangible. We could turn to what the IRS classifies as a business or a hobby.
You've been Googling again.
I always do, man. It's my thing. And here, check it out, man. There's something really important to know. Like, if your business claims a loss for too many years, right? Do you know that the IRS can tell you you're a hobby? You might think you're a business, but if you're always claiming a loss, you may be reclassified as a hobby.
Spend more than you make, yeah.
Right, because it says, here, for instance, where is it? You have to prove that you make a profit or you're motivated and you're trying to make a profit. For instance, it says, have you put in the necessary time and effort to turn a profit? Have you made a profit in this activity in the past, or can you expect to make a profit in the future? Do you have the necessary knowledge to succeed in this field? Do you depend on income for this activity? Are your losses beyond your control? These are the things that the IRS is going to look at if you try to claim your music as a business, and whether or not you're allowed to take those deductions. This also goes for authors, photographers, any type of Schedule C. And by the way, I'm not Googling that. I've lived that Schedule C thing, man, all my life. I know all about that, you know.
For our foreign friends, you're referring to the Internal Revenue Service and the tax system in the U.S., so it's going to be different.
Yeah, I don't really know. In fact, that would be a great thing to when we do our Twitter chat, our live musicians Twitter chat today at 3 p.m. Every Monday we do this, 3 p.m. I'd love to get, say, Nicholas or Rowan or some of our international listeners and regular contributors to talk about what happens in other countries, because being here in the USA, we know what we know, you know, and I'd love to know, or maybe even David from Canada. I'd like to know what goes on there. Basically here, the general rule of thumb is that if you have not turned a profit in at least 3 to 5 years, the IRS will categorize your business as a hobby. Now, this can be extended to a profit in 2 of those years. Okay. So that's interesting. So, but yeah, let's do that, today. We usually talk about the, Twitter chat at the end, but, since we're there, today at 3 p.m. every week, we have a Twitter chat. It's at hashtag MMMchat. And, we're going to talk about, hobby versus, business today. And I'd love to hear from our international, listeners. So
cool. You know, I've been rereading. There's a book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art. Have you read this book?
You know, no, it's on my list.
Yeah, it's a short book, and I picked it up. Yeah, I'm about halfway or so through it again, and I don't resonate with everything in there, but what I do, but the early parts of the book, there's some really good stuff about. He makes a reference to something that he calls resistance, and he always uses a capital R. He almost refers to it like as an entity, but resistance is the thing that's stopping us from getting our work done. You know, and it's the thing that distracts us. You know, I could be, you know, it's time to do my songwriting or recording or to call the venue or whatever, and then we find, you know, excuses and reasons, and there's all sorts of sly and cunning ways that resistance uses us to keep us from pursuing our passions. And so it's just an interesting take on it, but not all of them, like I said, I totally resonate with me. But what I do like about it is he's basically saying, yeah, to be a successful artist, you've got to, first of all, defeat resistance, but also just show up and do the work. And to me, this is another crucial element of being a pro, because everybody can be excited, like in the short term, you know, for a week or 2 or less, or, you know, and be excited about some kind of project. But it's like, can you can you on a consistent basis for weeks, months, and years on end work on your craft, you know, treat it as a priority in your life, sit down and write the songs, sit down and record, or wherever you go, make the calls, do the shows? Or do you only do that when you feel like it? You know, that to me is one differentiating factor from amateur versus pro. Are you willing to do the work, whether you feel like it or not, and just do it on a consistent basis? You know?
Yeah, and we're not talking talent here either. I mean, you may be the world's greatest unknown guitar player. I mean, and I know people like this that are just like phenomenal, beyond phenomenal, and but they are not professionals. You know, it's not about your talent level. We're talking about, really, it is kind of a business perspective what we're really talking about here. You know what I mean? You could be, like I say, the world's greatest singer, world's greatest guitar player, but just because you go out and, you know, you do play, you're not treating it as a business. You know what I mean? So we're not talking talent level, because I hate that word amateur, because I know many musicians that could be classified as amateur that just blow away the professionals. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
amateur has a lot of connotations to it, like it's less than.
It's like it's a dirty word. I don't like that word.
So maybe we should use pro versus hobbyist. I think that was, you know, or part-time, you know, and again, there's nothing wrong with you saying, you know what, I'm just not just don't have the dedication, or the consistency to be a pro at this. So like me, you know, I don't downplay or water down my activities just because it's not my full-time, you know, I decided long ago not to make it my full-time pursuit. I mean, I feel I'm very fulfilled, and I'm reaching a lot of people with my music, at least in a local